What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and I wanted to record a pretty quick video on the internet's seeming opinion on crit marksmen being bad in patch 10.23 in League of Legends, and there's a couple things to break apart here. There's actually a lot to break apart here. Ultimately, here's a couple things I want to say. First of all, this is actually a video on pretty short notice. This is the result of maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours of effort. As you can kind of see on the screen here, doing some math, kind of setting some things up, and getting a decent first glance at the answer. This is not nearly as high quality or well researched as some of the last videos I've done like this, like the mana one or the base stats ones from before. This is a pretty small amount of effort. The other thing I want to point out is I want to ask a question. I forgot to do this with the math video, so I'm going to ask it now before I forget, which is I want you to literally write down the answer to this question so you can check back on it at the end of the video to see if you were right or not. Which is, do you think crit itemization got weaker in, and let me specify what I mean by crit itemization. Itemization for crit marksman, right? So did the overall itemization package for Caitlyn, Aphelios, Jinx, Tristana, I mean, you can see the list right here, did the itemization package for these champions get weaker? As a strict comparison, 1-to-1, 1022 to 1023, did the itemization package get stronger, weaker, or stay about the same? And I want you to, if you want to pause the video and think about it a bit more, that's fine. But I want you to give yourself an answer so that we can then use that at the end for some further thoughts. Okay, so do that. Now, the couple things this video will not do, right? This video is not going to compare what crit marksman got compared to what other classes got. Right? I'm not going to sit here and say, well, mages got new Luden's Echo, but marksman got new shield bow. Which one? That's not the point of this video, okay? This is to strictly compare as much as we can apples to apples. Now, it is possible, certainly, that crit marksman got weaker because tanks and mages and assassins all got more. Now, we know, for example, mage junglers, by losing Runic Echoes, got weaker as a class this patch. They directly lost something that was good. And this is after we realized that mage itemization is very good this patch. A bunch of mage mythics getting nerfed in 1024. We know that tanks were overtuned, but tanks weren't so overtuned that they were just completely crushing all the mage junglers because, well, Graves is still doing fine. And Master Yi is still doing fine, right? There are plenty of other junglers that were doing fine despite tanks overperforming. That's not the reason Nidalee has a 43% win rate, or Lilia has a 45% win rate, or Karthus has a 44% win rate. Right? So we have very obvious examples, like mage junglers lost something and thus lost power, and then we can go in other places and say, well, did other people lose anything? Did other people gain anything? So this video is not comparing crit marksman to other champions, and it's not really comparing crit marksman to other classes of marksmen, like comparing to Ezreal or comparing to Jhin or comparing to other slightly non-standard crit marksmen. You know, Lucian's kind of in the middle. So let's go into what I actually did, okay? Let's go into what I actually did, which is I took the 7 marksmen that usually build a crit item first. Yes, of course, Twitch eventually goes into Critical Strike. Yes, Jhin goes into Critical Strike items to some degree, but the champions that before and after bought a crit item first were Caitlyn, Samira, Jinx, Tristana, Aphelios, Xayah, and Sivir. Everyone else tended to, more often than not, buy a non-crit item. This is not to say that Twitch is not still affected and whatnot, but I wanted to make this somewhat as simple as possible. And so what I did is then I went to public stats, I went to Lolalytics, and I looked at the entirety of patch 10.22 as one data set and the entirety of patch 10.23 as a different data set. I didn't care about what MMR you were in. I didn't care about the win rate of your items. I wanted to say, what were people buying pre-patch and what are people buying today? And that's all I care about. I'm simply doing pick rate. I'm not going to sit here and analyze what are technically the optimal builds and what should we really be doing at all points in time. Although if you get a big enough data set, that website will do that for you. What are the actual best items? Spoiler alert, Triple BF Sword Caitlyn was still the right build in 10.22, but people more commonly built certain things, and so that's what I put down. As I said, what were people building pre-patch? What were people building post-patch? To make the math even easier, I just said you're level 18, and you either have your steroid on or you don't. So we have, Caitlyn. Samira is without Wild Rush. I realize that she does have an attack speed steroid, but it's Jinx and Minigun versus Rocket form. It's Tristana with and without Rapid Fire. It's Aphelios, again, level 18 all skills. Xayah with and without W, and Sivir with and without W. With rank 3 ultimate. Yes, technically, when you build your first item Essence Reaver or first item Infinity Edge or first item Shield Bow, you're like level 9. I realize, again, these are not perfect, but I want to point out that I'm not trying to use a like 0.2% DPS increase, which is like the variance you're going to actually have as champions level and D level. I'm just trying to say, look, in broad strokes, how good is itemization? I want to be clear in that the corners that I have cut, not including runes, not fine-tuning champion levels, not even really thinking about the costs that much, although they are written down here to some degree, we are going to get close enough to at least inform. In all my days and months and hours upon hours of doing this kind of work, spreadsheets like these and spreadsheets like these and spreadsheets like these, the little fine-tuned details, like exactly how many stacks Gathering Storm have, is not worth the effort, okay? I want to be kind of clear about that. We are cutting a lot of corners, and these corners are worth cutting. Preamble out of the way, let's talk about what our actual findings were. All right, so let's talk about our data set. Here are the items that these champions bought more often than not. This is, yeah, here we go. There's a spot. It was, Stormrazor, i.e. Rapid Fire, a lot of GA, everyone with Berserker's Greaves, a lot of GA, Mortar Reminder were the items people tended to buy. Almost everyone bought Phantom Dancer at some point in their build path. Right, we're kind of like this. It's pretty much only Jinx often tended to skip Phantom Dancer because she really wanted Hurricane and Rapid Fire Cannon and wanted more raw AD afterwards. Almost every single marksman in the game bought Infinity Edge first or second. In fact, every single one that we measured did, in fact, buy it first or second, because, of course, Infinity Edge was incredibly overtuned pre-patch and had to be bought first or second. You were really, really trolling if you weren't. Every Xayah who went Essence Reaver Rapid Fire Cannon is an idiot. If you did this last patch, shame on you. You are bad at understanding itemization in League of Legends. Other things I want to point out is raw AD is very, very good early game. So a lot of these builds are Stormrazor IE or Essence Reaver IE or IE Stormrazor, things like that. A couple, of course, did go Hurricane, right? The pure auto attackers, the really, really auto attack heavy champions like Jinx and Aphelios were Hurricane users. This makes sense. Far more of their power budget is in their pure auto attack. So Tristana, I want to say, is a decent Hurricane user as well, but wasn't the most popular build out there. Now, we very quickly go apples to oranges because these are our old builds, and I mean, they're giving us very much just raw stats. Rapid Fire Cannon gives some range, Phantom Dancer gives a shield, eventually we get into Mortal Reminder stuff with other things going on, but the early items are very, very stat heavy. With the exception of basically Phantom Dancer coming in, and Death Dance for Samira, we're really, really just indexing on pure damage here. There's very, very little we're actually paying for otherwise. Obviously, PD is very effective. And so when we go and look at our other builds down here, and so what I did, by the way, said, okay, let's assume you are, again, we're just doing level 18 as our assumption. So here's your level 18 AD, here's level 18 attack speed, again, with your steroids on and everything else. And then here's how much Berserker's Greaves plus your first major item costs. We have the costs of all the items written down over here, the stats and all the items written down over here. So we would compare them. These are the new ones. Here's the old ones. And we just kind of went back and forth and just kept plugging in numbers and saying, okay, how much were you actually doing? Okay, so here's how much AD you had. Here's how much bonus attack speed you had overall as a champion, counting your base stats plus the item. And here is your effective crit modifier. These are pretty much handwritten in, but these are the numbers, right? By the time you have IE, you do 1.31 times as much damage from crit as opposed to just 1.25 from Essence Reaver. Everyone had IE second, so 1.625. Everyone got another Zeal item third, except for Samira, so we're looking at 1.9 damage modifier. Most champions went full crit chance by now, so you had 4 crit items by this point in time, so 2.25 was the multiplier for most champions. But this meant that you were skipping Quicksilver Sash or Mortar Reminder or any form of lifesteal if you were doing this. So the champions that did skip on max crit, we're looking at Jinx, who is going into early Mortar Reminder. We're looking at Sivir, who's going into early Bloodthirster. We're looking at Aphelios, who was getting, I guess what was Aphelios getting? He was also getting early Mortar Reminder. Rapid Fire Cannon was, Samira was getting Death Dance early. In fact, we have an error with Samira here. That should not be 2.25. So let's actually just, change that one real quick. 1.9375. Samir had Death Stance earlier, so let's not get that one wrong and copy the wrong crit damage over. We certainly can make mistakes here. And then her last item was GA, so we're actually, yeah, still. Wait, should we actually be lower? What was Samir's third item? Phantom Dancer. Okay, yeah. So 1.9325 is correct then. 165 to 19. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I found an error while I was taping this live because, again, I am imperfect. There are going to be the occasional errors in doing this kind of stuff. I did the best I could. I'm sure there's going to be one or two things that are still wrong even after the fact. Okay, so I hope you can kind of understand the methodology, right? I just kept adding in how much attack damage you have by taking, what you had with your fourth item, adding it to your fifth item, adding in whatever your sixth item was, and then to kind of keep a bit of. So then here's what happened, right? I said, okay, well now we have our multiplication. We multiply our total AD times our attack speed modifier times our crit chance, or like a crit modifier, right? Well, because I have crit chance, I'm doing 1.25 times as much damage or 1.3 times as much damage. I then jotted down important passives that you pay a lot of money for. So like Stormrazor, for example, you're not paying a lot of money for the passives. I didn't write it down. But if you're buying a rapid fire cannon, which I put in yellow, you're getting bonus range. If you're getting Phantom Dance, which I put in blue, you're getting this big shield. That's obviously valuable. If you're buying a Bloodthirster or a Death Stance, you're getting some lifesteal. If you're getting Mortar Reminder, which is Armor Pen and Healing Cut, I put it in green and said, okay, well, all of these champions, every single one of them bought some kind of utility in their last 3 item slots. They still have damage on them, of course, but they all built, one of these 5 items where they built, they built some kind of lifesteal. Bloodthirster or Death Stance. They built Rapid Fire Cannon, 4 out of the 7. They built Guardian Angel, 4 out of the 7. 6 out of the 7 built a Phantom Dancer, and 4 out of the 7 built a Mortal Reminder. Right? Most of Phantom Dancer, Mortal, Rapid Fire Cannon, Lifesteal, whatever, all about 50-50. So this is the things that they bought, right? These are the things we have to track, that we are measuring DPS, but we're also measuring what kind of passives they got, because we want to be a little bit fair about this. Now, I'm not going to math out exactly how much damage a PD shield should be worth, because that's not the world we're living in, but it's at least, hey, let's remember what it is we're holding on to, what it is we need to keep in our heads. And then this is the actual DPS, not counting armor. This is now multiplying into their base attack speed and saying, okay, look, 1 on Caitlyn is 245 DPS, 2 on Caitlyn is 277 DPS, 650, 850, 1000. This is the actual DPS of Caitlyn with these builds. Now, again, I'm not counting runes, and I'm not counting armor. But that doesn't really matter. Now, yes, of course, this means that we are kind of biasing towards Guardian Angel, because a Mortar Reminder, like here, has Armor Pen on it. And Armor Pen is a very, very, very good stat, and yet we're not calculating it here. And this is worth keeping in mind. Because we're doing a quick and dirty version, we are not counting % Armor Pen. Yes, it matters, but it immediately expands the testing matrix, the mathematics matrix, really, as, okay, now what's a low armor value? What's a high armor value? How much healing are we expecting to come in? It's like, let's just kind of not. But again, as long as we are keeping track of what we haven't done, we at least can keep it in our minds. So this is what we did. Here's our big DPS chart for all 7 champions, plus the 3 that we chose modal increased attack speed buffs, and said, here is your DPS matrix. For fun, we took median DPS, we took median item cost. So, this is kind of the price of these builds, and not counting the Doran's Blade and the potions that we're buying. Just to kind of keep them in mind, right? Just so that we can know, hey, here's what these builds kind of cost. So then we kind of repeated our work a little bit, but we wrote down all the new items that we're going to buy. This is, basically every item that was commonly built by these champions. This is technically, no one that we're actually looking at is running Gale Force, although it is a good item. We have, the misc stats written down here and whatnot. But ultimately, we took the items people are actually buying and used those for our calculations. Now, Law Analytics is a kind of weird thing with the current season items, even though we have a pretty big data set, which is I would click, just show me the 5, just show me the column, just give me the 5 most commonly built items. And it would do kind of funky things like throw collector in there when it was never the most common item slot. And so I looked at the most common item that wasn't already purchased per slot, and then went that way. It meant that we had some kind of weird calls to make, like IE and Stormrazor second was really, really close on, I think, Caitlyn. And then IE third was way more common than Stormrazor third, because no one's ever going to buy Stormrazor third. Right? If they ever buy Stormrazor second, they're always buying IE third. If they're ever buying IE second, they're probably buying something else third that's not Stormrazor. So we just didn't have Stormrazor in that purchase, because technically IE was more common second. So when IE second is moved on. Technically, we're doing kind of funky things. We're doing a little bit of self-selecting here. Also want to point out that players are not necessarily building optimally in the current season. Right, you kind of expect that after 7 years, give or take, of building itemization on AD carries, that culminating at 10.22, people have more knowledge in their item builds in 10.22 than they do in 10.23. So we actually have an extra bias here, which is people's builds are kind of necessarily weaker. They're just following the rec item page on like the shop itself and just saying, yeah, Riot decided this was decent, let's buy it. And it's a decent first step is having, diamond to masters level gameplay analysts like, here's probably what you buy first on Caitlyn. Go for it. Probably don't try the lethality stuff, but people can figure out down the line what the better items actually are, and we have a bias in that people haven't fully explored the items yet. Is Bloodthirster or Collector second correct on Samira? Well, people are tending to build Collector second because that's recommended, and BT isn't. BT maybe should be built second on Samira, but it's not because it's not the recommended item. This is a thing that people will figure out over time. So I just want to keep that in mind in all of your heads. So we once again went and jotted down the most common item builds for our 7 Marksmen, and it's basically all Kraken Slayer or Shield Bow. Pretty equally traded back and forth, which is kind of cool. Everyone went Infinity Edge second or third, which is good. Small things I've seen online tend to slightly shift that, i.e. second is probably correct more often than not. We can do probably a follow-up video or tweet or something. I don't want to do the math live. I might pause the recording and do it. Exactly how much is Infinity Edge giving you in terms of % damage? What are you paying for? It's something we can dive into and do like a 15-minute video about, or maybe less, but maybe not here. And then because people are just kind of buying things, every single player went Mortal Reminder, Guardian Angel. Want to point out, again, because of the way we measure this, we never have a Bloodthirster in for Samira. Again, there are problems with this testing sort of view. It's not a huge deal. Again, we're doing quick and dirty numbers here, but technically there's no BT, but literally everyone is going Mortal Reminder, Bloodthirster. Yes, that means Collector probably is actually Bloodthirster in the real world, and we're just Shield Bow IE. Or Shield Bow BT IE, and then this is probably still Guardian Angel or something else. Who knows? I realize that this build also, none of these builds have Armor Pen in them. People are choosing Healing Cut above Armor Pen. That's not necessarily correct, but it's what people are buying more commonly. Considering how common tanks are, I feel like people are probably misbuilding, and that is something else that might be depressing win rates, is Lord Dominic's probably coming in at incorrect times. But regardless, again, we're just picking what is common and using that as our hands off. Let's do the math, okay? So we go in, we did the exact same thing, right? We took our AD, we took our attack speed, we took our item builds. Every single person going Mythic first. What's your AD? What's your attack speed? I'm pretty sure I caught myself perfectly every time, but of course Mythic passes exist, so champions are getting 10% more attack speed in Kraken Slayer. They're getting 5 more AD when they're going for Shield Bow per Mythic, right? So on item 2 it's 5 AD, on item 3 it's 5 AD. On item 4, it's 5 AD. On item 5, it's 5 AD. Let's make sure we get that right. Whether or not those items give attack damage in and of themselves, whether or not they give attack speed in and of themselves. Let's make sure we did that correctly. We're pretty sure we did. And so we go down here. Now, this is the copy-pasted chart from before. Actually, no. This is sorry. Okay, so this is right, attack damage times attack speed times crit. We wrote on our new crit numbers, right? 20 crit chance is 15% more damage from crits, as opposed to the old one where if you rushed IE, it was 31% more damage from crits. Obviously, you're getting twice as much sort of crit value with the 25%, 2.25, compared to the 20%, 1.75. It's another 15% increased damage modifier that we're not using, but we're getting other stats instead, like more attack speed. By the time everyone got IE third, we're always here at 159.4. With the exception of exactly Caitlyn, who did IE second. We're at 1.3 compared to, pre-patches 1.6. Again, it's still twice as good until IE comes in. But then what's kind of nice is if we look at like at the very end, right? Our very end game builds are, 2.25 or 1.9x damage from crit. Our end game builds here are 2.15x damage from crit. So we actually eventually catch up, right? Our total crit damage modifier catches up in most cases here by end game. Which we know because most marksmen didn't actually go all the way to 100% crit chance in the old patch. But now that you can get Armor Pen, Healing Cut, and Bloodthirster, all without sacrificing crit, right? That's more likely to happen. We're very likely to reach 100% crit chance, which is nice. Yes, 5 item builds are not all that common. We're usually looking at 2 to 3, but again, if we did the math, we did, okay, what's the AD times the attack speed modifier times crit modifier? Okay, we double copied, we actually copied down the colors from our old chart here and said, okay, now keep in mind these DPS numbers, we're comparing against Rapid Fire Cannon, we're comparing against Bloodthirster or Death Stance, we're comparing against these other itemization choices here. We then said, okay, well, what are we actually getting, though, in the real world? And we said, okay, well, in the items we're actually buying, and this is now multiplying by base attack speed, right, these numbers, I guess they're these numbers over here. We said, okay, we multiplied out, we multiplied by our base attack speed. Here is the actual DPS of these champions. Okay, here, let's reconvene. I know I've been kind of rambling on. Here's the actual DPS of these champions. Again, not counting armor, not counting runes, not counting things like ability haste or special on-hit effects. And said, hey, okay, look, all these champions all built Phantom Dancer, right? All these people in blue, they all built Phantom Dancer. Well, these are the ones who built Shield Bow, okay? So Shield Bow is very, very similar in Phantom Dancer to, very, very similar to Phantom Dancer in actual shield value. The numbers are almost identical. Of course, Kraken Slayer doesn't have that shield, but it has the bonus on hit damage. Every single one of these champions, except for this one here, and to be fair, Shield Bow has lifesteal on it. Every single one of the champions is buying Bloodthirster, which is, hey, to be fair, only these sort of 3 champions bought lifesteal before. They were relying on Legend Bloodline otherwise. Hey, all these champions bought healing reduction in Mortal Reminder. All these champions that bought Mortal Reminder up here, you know, of course, they're getting Armor Pen, but they're getting worse Grievous Wounds. Obviously, we could just replace Mortal Reminder with Lord Dominic's, and we could get something similar. So, like, this could be a very easy replacement. You can just replace Mortar with Lord Dominic's, depending on which one you think is more important. You don't have to go Bloodthirster in games where you already went Shield Bow. But again, we're just picking what's common, right? What are easy replacements? And the stats are close enough anyway. But it's worth pointing out that, yes, you know, we aren't getting the exact same unique passives. Almost none of these champions are going Rapid Fire Cannon. So all these Rapid Fire Cannon bonus range bumps that we were getting over here, we're not getting those anymore. All these champions that are buying Hurricane, which is basically Jinx and Aphelios, they still built Hurricane here as well. So, like, we're not actually losing that. That's still here. So what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of what's actually happening? Okay, well, we copied down our DPS one more time. And said, okay, here's our new DPS with the new builds. Here's our old DPS with the old builds. What do we have, right? So here's our first actual conclusion, kind of, again. And it's, what is the auto attack DPS before... Oh, this is the raw AD one, sorry. Raw DPS is here. There we go. What is our raw DPS before and after? Okay, so most common 5 items in 10.22, most common 5 items in 10.23. What is our DPS before and after? What I've done here is I've highlighted in yellow every champion that goes Kraken Slayer, thus their DPS is undercounted, because Kraken Slayer clearly has an on-hit true damage bump that is obviously very, very useful. We just don't have it here because I didn't... Honestly, it wouldn't have been that hard to do, but I chose not to do it. Because, look, in terms of just raw stats, here's what we've got. And honestly, Caitlyn, more often than not, is dealing more damage than before. Now, again, Caitlyn used to get Rapid Fire Cannon, used to get Phantom Dancer, used to get Guardian Angel. Instead, Caitlyn, right, Rapid Fire Cannon, Mortal Reminder, Bloodthirster. Well, that's the same. Instead of a PD shield, we have a Mortal Reminder for Healing Cut. Instead of a GA, we have a Bloodthirster for a bigger shield. Well, the BT shield is not too far off from what Phantom Dancer gives, and Mortal Reminder is a nice item. So, yeah, we could obviously turn GA into GA, but maybe BT is better than GA. I don't know. But, like, again, I'm just saying, what do people build before? What do they build after? Is this a very inaccurate system? Yeah, kind of it is. Like... We are not comparing completely apples to apples, I get that. But what are people building on Caitlyn? Well, they're building more damage on Caitlyn. Caitlyn is objectively dealing more damage before we even count Kraken Slayer's true damage. What about Samira? Well, Samira is, you know, kind of awkward here. In fact, I'm pretty sure we've made some mistakes because I'm very confident I copied numbers down without the calculations. Even though I fixed Samira's crit damage thing up here and fixed her like 4th item, you know, critting the wrong amount, basically. and copying over incorrectly. I'm pretty sure I didn't. Those numbers didn't come down here, so that's me being silly. But ultimately, Samira's damage did go slightly down, at least according to what we're looking at here. Well, she's running an armor pen item. Her damage drops because she had a collector. Right? We're not counting the 18 lethality on collector, so maybe we're undercounting Samira slightly. Again, we used to build Bloodthirster or Death Dance here in Samira. Well, thankfully, she has Shield Bow, so that's pretty similar. We have the lifesteal already. We have, the durability already. Her fourth item was Phantom Dancer. Okay, well, you don't really want to double count Shield Bow. That's kind of unfair. And then her fifth item was Guardian Angel, which we're still counting here on Samira as well. And I want to point out, by the way, that Samira actually gained win rate this patch because, you know, we should probably count collector appropriately. But if we're just doing this really, really kind of gross math, then yeah, the damage is lower. Okay, what about Jinx? Now, Jinx is a pretty easy case because she's just buying raw damage early and late. Well, indeed, Jinx, Kraken Slayer Hurricane is a bit weaker than Infinity Edge Hurricane in terms of raw crit DPS, but with Kraken Slayer's on-hit damage, probably get a bit closer. And it's still worth pointing out that as soon as you buy IE third, look at all these champions spike really hard. These champions all gain a ton of extra damage by buying IE third. That's going to feel pretty good. We go into Mortal, which is obviously, again, even better of an item. We go into Bloodthirster, and we get up to 70% bonus damage as we go into bigger and bigger crit items. And so for a lot of these cases, basically, and we're just looking at this right here, by the way, is the median value. It's like, hey, two of these numbers are higher, two of these numbers are lower. What's the middle one? It's this. So in a lot of cases, more often than not, marksmen are dealing more damage. I want to point out that in the vast majority of time, marksmen are outperforming in the late game. They are doing much better in the late game than before because their itemization can keep scaling crit, it multiplies into Infinity Edge, and their late game crit damage becomes 100% at 2.15, which is generally better than 75% at 2.25. So if you can get onto all 5 crit items, you will, in fact, and even on 4, it's pretty solid, you will be in a better spot than pre-patch. In the early game, though, we have a lot of evidence that our first 2 items are, in fact, weaker. And I want to be clear about something, that the first 2 items are really, 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 really relevant. It is extremely, extremely, extremely relevant. What's going on in your first 2 items certainly matters a lot because most games end at 2 to 3 items, right? So if you're weaker and then equal, you are an overall weaker champion throughout the game of League of Legends. That is an inarguable fact. Now, again, we are not really looking at Kraken Slayer damage. We are kind of not really measuring Shield Bow durability as well, but I want to point out, these items have 12% lifesteal on them. That is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly valuable. And we should be, keeping that at least in our minds, that these items, or these champions, are all getting value from Shield Bow that is not turning into DPS. And every champion who is going Essence Reaver before the patch is still going, in most cases at least. So basically looking at like Sivir, looking at Xayah, champions like this who are getting Essence Reaver very early on, they are still buying Essence Reaver, and Essence Reaver has Spellblade on it, which we are also not counting yet. That is still more damage in the kits that we are not putting into these numbers. Some of these cases, they are losing a lot of damage because Xayah is building an item with 50 AD on it, which is the new Essence Reaver. And it turns out that that's going to look really bad when it only has 40 attack damage and 20 crit because you're paying for Spellblade. And so any champion who's going new Essence Reaver is getting undercounted in this. Just like champions who's going Old Mortar Reminder with % Armor Pen is also getting undercounted in it. Okay, so what else do we have going on here? Well, we have one final thing, which is Riot said they wanted to shift power away from raw crit DPS. And I want to be clear that basically, especially if you look at the first 3 items before you get any armor pen in, I mean, lethality notwithstanding, because that one does exist, crit and attack speed only ever show up in raw DPS. They almost never show up in spell damage. Now, some champions like Tristana and Xayah and Caitlyn have some level of crit scaling on their abilities. Caitlyn scales the headshots, Tristana scales the E, Xayah scales her E as well. Some champions do in fact have crit scaling on their abilities. And to some degree, champions have crit scale or have attack speed scaling of their abilities, in that Tristana can get her 4th shot off to explode the Satchel Charge. Xayah can get enough attack speed to get more feathers down, and thus get more blade collar damage. There are some attack speed incentives on spells. There is some. But in general, spells mostly care about raw AD and then lethality or percent armor pen. And so I said, okay, well, let's actually compare that as well then. Are we getting as much AD? Because one thing that I thought was important here is, and this actually happened a fair bit, I thought Riot needed to add more raw attack damage items into Marksman itemization. I thought it was very common for champions to power trough on double zeal because their attack damage stopped scaling up, and early to mid game abilities are an important part of their damage output. And if you're not getting any raw AD by building rapid fire cannon then building hurricane, you're not getting any more ability damage, and that's falling off a cliff as people are getting levels, health, and armor, and your ability stopped being useful. And so when Riot added a bunch of new abilities, they added raw AD to Hurricane, which I thought was actually kind of nice, although kind of a weird place to put it, of all places. They added, I think they kind of smoothed out some of their build paths. They added items like Collector so that you can kind of feel good about a sort of an early spike by buying a lethality crit item. I was like, okay, cool. We can itemize 100% crit and get raw AD all along the way. Right? We can go Hurricane, we can go Mortar Reminder. Like, we have Zeal upgrades that have AD on top. Like, that's really useful. That's good. We get move speed while still buying raw AD. But here's the thing. Everyone's old build had Infinity Edge first or second with 80 attack damage on it. And then for most of them, they also would go Essence Reaver, which had like 60 or 70 AD on it, or Storm Razor with about 50 attack damage on it as well. And that meant in a lot of cases, AD carries before the patch, because we're looking at raw AD before and after. Raw AD before and after. And, well, aside from Caitlyn, who's buying Kraken Slayer when it was Storm Razor, and that has a bit more. Tristana the exact same way. These are Kraken Slayer instead of Storm Razor. Their one item spike has less AD on it. The exact thing I made a video on it like sometime last year about like, here's how I would fix AD carries. I would slap pickaxes onto Zeals, which is literally what happened with Hurricane, and basically what happened with Mortar Reminder, so that you could buy these things and feel good about them. But because all the old builds were IE first or second, and then Essence Reaver frequently first or second, like we can go look at our old builds here. We have them written down, right? Caitlyn was Storm Razor IE. Samira's Essence Reaver IE, right? Only Jinx and Aphelios were Hurricane users. Storm Razor IE, Reaver IE, Storm Razor IE, Reaver IE. Right? This is everyone's build. All the crit marksmen are buying 2 hard AD items, where a couple of them give attack speed, but all of them give crit. Now, I will say, from a feels perspective, attack speed does feel really good. And so Riot kind of, right, shifted these builds from 50% crit chance to 40% crit chance, which is fine, which should give room for more AD and more AS. Well, they're not getting more AD. Overall, they're not getting more attack damage. Are they getting more damage overall? Well, crit went down and AD on average went down. Attack speed probably went up, and here's our DPS before and after. It's, they're not better spellcasters. They're generally not better auto attackers. But I want to be clear on something. We aren't doing Kraken Slayer math, and we're not looking at shield bow durability. Those, to be completely fair, are relevant factors. And this does mean that there is a big gaping hole in this video. That is like absolutely a fact. There is a hole in this video because we are not adding Kraken Slayer to the math just yet. But in terms of raw auto attack damage, yep, the damage is on average lower for crit marksmen. All right, so we had a time jump here. I paused the recording, and number one, I fixed Samira. So this is now the more appropriate Samira math calculation, where from 3 and 4 items onwards, we're actually looking at Samira's old crit damage appropriately, since we had that copied over incorrectly. And sure enough, yep, still, again, not great the first 2 items, but once we hit the spot where Samira had stopped buying crit, we stopped giving her free crit chance in our calculations, and again, she joins the rest of the crew where her late game is better. One thing we also did, as you may have seen the numbers update, is we actually included Kraken Slayer. Now, much like we didn't include Armor Pen in Mortal Reminder before, we are not including true damage as extra special. Essentially, we just took Kraken Slayer damage, which we're just going to include as 26 damage on hit, even though it's like 26.6 repeating every third, and that obviously it can fall off between fights. You're not guaranteed to attack a multiple of 3 number of times. Technically, you can game it to where you attack minions twice and then jump in and go for a third auto. So there's like positive things that we're not including here either. But we included Kraken Slayer damage, so could be a bit more fair about this. And I want to point out that all the Kraken Slayer purchasers, by the way, are absolutely slaughtering their old DPS numbers. If you are a Kraken Slayer rusher, now that we're including the numbers, it is absolutely not close. The only exception is minigun form Jinx, because she got so much attack speed in a world where she's magically level, rank 5 minigun, which to be fair, level 9 Mythic is not absurd on an 80 carry, and Jinx's like rank up attack speed is not high at all. Her level up attack speed is not high at all. But with the exception of Jinx minigun, who gets so much attack speed from minigun that she does not care about attack speed on items, and Kraken Slayer, to be fair, has a lot. With that sole exception of a champ with too much attack speed for a fair comparison, and someone who is also starved for AD a fair bit, Kraken Slayer absolutely blows the old builds out of the water. Kraken Slayer on these 4 champions, Caitlyn, Jinx, Trist, and Sivir, just obliterates. Caitlyn, Jinx, Trist, Sivir absolutely obliterates their old builds. Now, to be fair, only one of them built old Infinity Edge. I mean, Stormrazor is CDR and such, right? Stormrazor versus IE is at least a close fight somewhat. But Kraken Slayer obliterates. We go to second item as well, and Kraken Slayer, for the most part, unless we're counting champions who, again, are, building purely double raw AD. Essence Reaver IE was always the best, really, because raw AD is just incredible. And especially when you consider things like Sivir W, which gives free attack speed and whatnot. Again, Kraken Slayer still is tending to win out overall. And then we already have established that, for the most part, late game AD carries simply deal more damage. The only ones who aren't absolutely crushing it are the, some of the BF Sword into a lot of crit stuff. So, I'm actually honestly a little bit surprised that Xayah is so far down late game, but again, a lot of that is that she's going shield bow, and that's obviously a less damaging item overall. So we have the amended results using Kraken Slayer, which is, okay, it actually is a lot better early game, but we still have the conclusions that, okay, DPS is higher in the early game, especially if you are going Kraken Slayer. If your DPS is lower because you're going shield bow, well, you've got a shield bow, right? You have life steals not being tracked. You have a shield when you get low that's not being tracked, and then even then your DPS is somewhat within the ballpark. One sec. Right, we're back. So the power trap here is because of Spellblade, because Xayah is spending 700 gold on a Sheen to go Essence Reaver. That is what she's commonly building. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's good. But again, we're very early in on the build, and we're not tracking things like Sheen upgrades. If I wanted to do a deep dive, a video this long, on just Xayah DPS, we could start picking apart how much she gets from Spellblade and all those other things, but suffice to say, we are not counting the item yet, and that is obviously an important part of her kit. It's doing all of her base AD, plus 40% of her bonus AD, which 2 items in is going to be 130 or something. Not 130, almost 100, depending on the build. So, there's like 130, something around there, damage that we're just skipping, which is obviously a bit problematic in terms of what's actually good on this champion. So again, we are undercounting some things. And then when we go on to items 3, 4, and 5, keep in mind that, the old builds were Death's Dance, Phantom Dancer Shield, GA Revive, Mortal Reminder, Armor Pen, Bloodthirster shielding, which, to be fair, we still have in all of these cases. So, in a couple of cases, we are undercounting damage early game currently because, well, Shield Bow is a good passive. And then in some of these late game scenarios, we are kind of undercounting late game, although all the rapid fire cannon users are still rapid fire cannon users for the most part. Or at least can be in the case of Caitlyn. And even with Caitlyn, she's actually doing more damage than before. Caitlyn never loses DPS compared to pre-patch. In fact, she can still get the some of these effects here, the extra shielding and whatnot by buying the new Bloodthirster and whatnot. But yes, we are immediately going into apples versus oranges. What kind of defensive items are we buying and whatnot? All I'm really trying to say at the end of the day is, well, current AD carry item builds that people are actively using, for the most part, now that we're actually counting Kraken Slayer, crit marksmen are, on average, dealing more damage. The ones who are dealing less are getting shield bow for more durability. And some of these numbers are like absurdly high, like the 60% damage increase for Tristana. Yes, we're competing with Guardian Angel and Armor Pen. Again, we're not counting this math, and that is a problem. But in auto attack DPS, it is not fair to say that AD carries, specifically crit marksmen, lost damage in the item system. That is not fair to say because the numbers do not support that thesis. In raw AD, I am sad about this. I really do, in fact, dislike that power has been shifted away from raw AD. Now, what's interesting is I still have to reconcile these numbers all being together, right? We only ever have really 4 factors. What's your AD? What's your attack speed? What's your crit? What's your on-hit effects? And then I guess also what's your armor pen? Because in exactly Samira's case, there's a collector right here in the new build. And I'm saying this because what I really care about with raw AD is not how much damage you're doing on hit, but how valuable are your spell casts. And considering that we have objectively lost crit damage, right? In every one of these champions, their old build in the first 2 items had Infinity Edge, which means by their second item, they had 50% crit chance and 2.25 crit damage. We have 40% crit chance and 1.75 crit damage in basically all of these cases. And yet, despite the fact that our raw AD tends to be lower, that our overall crit multiplier tends to be lower, but the fact that we are doing mostly more overall damage means that our damage is coming from attack speed, and it's coming from on-hit damage because, again, Kraken Slayer. What that means as a conclusion is this actually allows AD carries to feel better, right? Attack speed feels really, really good. It's why players like Crownshot kept saying they really, really loved Double Zeal Caitlyn because they can use their move speed and attack speed to kite better. No, your DPS is lower. It just felt better. That's it. Your DPS was lower. It just felt better. Riot has basically injected more attack speed into these early builds. I mean, every single AD carry mythic has attack speed on it. Yeah, Shield Bow's only 15, but this is pretty meaningful early on in the game. Kraken Slayer even has more attack speed in its mythic passive. As far as second item built for most of these champions, well, there's a couple of Hurricanes and Storm Razors and Hurricanes here, but there's also still plenty of pure raw AD, but there's also Essence Reavers, which, I'll be honest, are going to feel pretty good, right? And again, we look at all these power troughs. The Essence Reaver champions were getting Spellblade, all power troughed it too. If you're not going Essence Reaver, you're getting pretty close. Aphelios, rest in peace. You went Shield Bow, and your damage sucks. Samira, pretty similar bow, but we're not counting collector damage. We are somewhat uniquely not counting some of the effects we're getting the first 2 items that shows the power trough. Anyway, to sum up, it means that we are getting more attack speed. I mean, definitively so. There's no argument to be made. We are definitely getting, in a lot of cases, more attack speed than pre-patch. We are definitely getting less smaller crit numbers. I mean, that is not up for debate at all. We are definitely getting smaller crit numbers. But if you're going for a damage build, Kraken Slayer is objectively more damage than pre-patch, unless you're doing Spellblade. And even then, again, that math is down there somewhere. We are, in general, doing less spell damage. In general, these champions have less raw AD. And this is kind of the weird thing about being a spellcaster AD carry is you go and buy an Essence Reaver, and yet you really, really cared about stacking AD for your Q and E or Q and W, in Sivir's case, dealing more damage. This is a weird thing to reconcile. I'm not sure if Riot needs to... Actually, I'm pretty sure Riot is buffing Essence Reaver next patch to give it more AD, so some of this is getting better. But there are champions who got worse spells post-patch as a result. Now, maybe they should just go Collector, like Samira does, And the 18 lethality, though it's not reflected in the math here, is obviously going to give you more spell damage against champions, and that's going to be really relevant. Or you find something else to build, and it's going to work out in the end. Or you go shield bow because shield was going to give you raw AD with mythic passive, and that'll help kind of, keep track as well. Ultimately, my conclusion is crit marksmen are not dealing less damage than pre-patch. Ultimately, if there's one chart you're going to look at, it is this chart. And the only champions doing less damage got a shield bow, and the champions doing more damage got no defensive stats, first 2 items. Same as pre-patch, and are dealing more raw DPS. End of the day, crit marksmen are dealing more total damage than before. And if they aren't doing more total damage, it's because they're choosing to build more defensively than they had the option to. Every single champion pre-patch was building durability items 3rd or later. Stormrazor, IE, Hurricane, Infinity Edge, none of these give any durability at all, and they now have the option to. And the champions that are choosing to do this are choosing to sacrifice damage for durability. The champions that are building full damage, just like pre-patch, are doing more damage than pre-patch. At the end of the day, the only nerf to AD carries is people choosing to do less damage. The later calculations get more difficult. They go case by case. We have to start looking at multiple targets and what kind of stats they have. But in isolation, crit optimization did not get weaker. This was kind of rambly. This is what I get for having a sort of a 2-hour prep with no scripting. Hope it was still enjoyable. Let's see you next time.